Hey, Falcons and NFL fans. Welcome to another episode of Jocks and Pigskins with Tom Pollen. I'm Dave Holcomb on Atlanta Sports Unlimited channel. Got another great show for you today and next week. That's all we got before the Falcons play their first regular season game. And actually, by the time we have our next show, we will have had a regular season game. The Lions and Chiefs open on Thursday. So we're just a few days away after months and months of waiting, Tom. We're almost there.
I know. Yep. the starting line is in sight. So, looking forward to it, looking forward to the season. You always look forward to it. You got 32 teams that think that they are 32 teams that think they're Super Bowl contenders, or 32 fan bases who think their teams are Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah.
And you just go from there. So it's fun to watch. Chiefs and Lions is going to be great because we don't know how good the Lions are going to be this year. Are they going to take that next step, or was that a mirage? And sometimes with the Lions, you just never know.
Yeah, I can see the Bears fan in you come out there a little bit, because I think you're right. The Lions could totally fall on their face. We don't know for sure, but there's been a lot of hype around them, and I would be surprised if they're not 500. I'll go out on a limb and say that. I think they're going to win at least 9 games. And if you were going to make me pick, like I think was that last week where somebody put us on the spot, or 2 weeks ago with the Falcons record, if you're going to put my feet to the fire and make me pick a winner in the NFC North, I'm picking the Lions.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people are.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. At least the Lions probably are more complete coming together from their last year's squad. So, I mean, everybody else has a lot of questions.
Well, that is the thing. Yeah, it's somewhat by default. I picked the Lions because I don't have faith in Jordan Love. Vikings just kind of fell apart last year and let go of Dalvin Cook. So they're not going to be the same. And the Bears are still not there yet. And if they take a big step this year, they're going to win 6, 7, 8 games. And that's not, I don't think they're quite there with their competing for the division title yet. So that leaves the Lions.
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, if this Bears team gels, then it could be interesting. But there's a lot, I always talk about it, and this goes with the Falcons this year too, is how many ifs do you have on your team? How many times do you have to ask the question, what if? And the more you have to ask what if, the tougher it is your team is to make the playoffs. The
more can go wrong.
Yeah. So, the Bears have a lot of what ifs. I think the Falcons have a lot of what ifs. So, but the Falcons are in a division that I think is ripe for the taking.
Yeah.
And I think they have just as good a chance as anybody of emerging out of this division. But what if Desmond Ridder, falls apart? What if he comes through? What if, the passing game doesn't come together as you would like? What if the defensive line hasn't improved? A lot of what ifs. So it's going to be interesting to see. And that's part of the fun of week 1. You get to start seeing some of the answers to some of these questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you start to see maybe some resemblance of answers in the preseason, but we know that you put too much stock in the preseason, that can really can really not be true. It can be a total facade, one way or the other. Team looking really horrible and then being fine in the regular season, and then a preseason champion totally flat in the regular season.
Right.
So,
right.
We've already got some comments rolling in. That's great. Keep them coming. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. I know it's a big football day overall because it's week 1 in college football. Of course, last week was week 0, but I'm not sure we had any noon matchups on the East Coast last week. Definitely lots of games today. So we appreciate you making us a part of your Saturday and part of your holiday weekend. Labor Day, lots of people are out doing stuff. So we appreciate you watching live or on replay, however you're enjoying the show.
Absolutely. always appreciate our audience. And we're glad to have you here and lay in your comments. Looking forward to, that's part of the fun of doing this show is seeing all the comments come in.
Got some already, as I said. Gary says, what's with the Syracuse jersey? Falcons use a 44-type running back. Maybe they have one now. Yeah, I think they're hoping that Bijan Robinson is Jim Brown-like or Ernie Davis-like, as he was at Syracuse.
I was about to say, let's tone it down just a bit.
Well, that's what they're hoping. I'm not saying that's what he's going to be.
Right.
Jim Brown being the greatest player, without a doubt, in football history. I'll go out on a limb.
You actually want to go out on that limb?
I was going to say I'm going out on a limb, but maybe not. I mean, if you look at his stats, it just I find it hard that it's even really a debate. But there's been a lot of great players in football history. So
a guy named Sweetness here in Chicago.
Yeah, he was pretty good too. But
man, I don't want to show that. I hope nobody from Chicago is actually watching right now. You're going to get torn apart.
I say that, obviously Walter Payton's a top 5 player of all time.
Yeah.
But, I
don't deny what Jim Brown did in the NFL. As a matter of fact, he would have did more of it if Art Modell hadn't been such an idiot. So, that's just the way he went.
We'll never have another player lead the league in rushing 8 of his 9 seasons in his career. I mean, Jim Brown won the MVP his first year, and he won his MVP his last year. Mm-hmm. He was the biggest, strongest, fastest player on the field at all times. Offense, defense. It didn't and we'll never have that ever again. Which makes it hard to judge players across eras. And Walter Payton was fantastic. Barry Sanders was fantastic. LaDainian Tomlinson. We got an Emmitt Smith fan in Pantera. Mm-hmm. Jerry Rice, of course, is up there too. But
the thing is with Brown, it seems like every time you read about opponents and how they felt about Jim Brown, they hated seeing Jim Brown in a one-on-one situation. They did not want to have to tackle him one-on-one because it was
he was bigger than them, and if he didn't want to run him over, he was going to beat him with his speed too. So
exactly.
Unbelievable player. And I'm wearing 44 for Syracuse opening their season, Joe, with jokes about Colgate. Yes, Syracuse playing Colgate today, which, it'll be a fun game for Syracuse, I guess. But I went to Syracuse, but I don't really follow their football team anymore. I did when I was there. So I don't think I can name one player for Syracuse football. But I will be having the game on today, and I got my jersey on.
Of course.
Yeah.
You got to. So it should be fun. Yeah, it's football Saturday. Everything's starting. I know. It's exciting.
Yes. Joe says, no way Arizona thinks they're a Super Bowl contender.
Well, their fans, I don't even think their fans do, tell you the truth, Joe.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, every fan base thinks that if their team can come together and if this happens and that happens, we can actually contend. No, I don't think Arizona believes that for a second. I don't think the team or the fans believe that for a second. So, yeah, I will agree with you there, Joe.
Hard to believe that when, Kyler Murray's not there. And I'm not a big Kyler Murray fan. Don't think they would really be contenders even with him. But when you don't have your franchise quarterback, I think even fans know that there's not much of a chance of making a deep run.
No chance at all.
Yeah.
Who are they going for? I don't even want to think about who they're going forward with as far as quarterback, but no, they're not going to have a deep run. It's going to be over fairly early for them. So
yeah. I think usually you said all 32 teams think they got a shot. There's usually like 1 or 2 that are like clearly the worst in the league, at least for half a season. And then sometimes those teams can turn around and win some games when guys are fighting for jobs or whatever in November and December for next year. And Arizona's at one of those teams this year going into the year. There's clearly not just missing Murray, but the you just look up and down their roster, it's pretty bare.
No, a lot of people are saying that Arizona's really tanking this season.
Yeah.
And have no problem putting that out there. Basically, and I haven't seen anybody from Arizona kind of denying it, feeling like they have anything going on this season. So, it's a terrible thing to be a fan of that kind of team. And that's just
one that's tanking. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a fan of tanking. I think, fortunately, it's not really been as big of a thing last few years as maybe 10 years ago. Although, I don't know. I feel like I haven't heard it as much. I guess we got it with maybe Tua ended it because that was such a big thing with the Dolphins. And, of course, the Dolphins kind of got in trouble for losing on purpose. So maybe that has deterred teams from being so obvious about it anyway. But, the Dolphins were trying to – the front office was trying to tank. The owner wanted them to tank.
Yeah.
Brian Flores didn't cooperate, and that was one of the teams that started so poorly. I think they were 0-8 to begin the season, but then they won like 5 games in the back half of the year and ended up with like the 6th pick, but they still got Tua anyway. So it's like, that just proves to you that you don't know that the NFL draft is an inexact science. And the guy that's going 1 right now, if we had the draft today, is not going to go 1 in April. So,
probably not. Yep.
So what purpose do you really have in tanking? You have no idea how the draft is really going to shape up.
If your player personnel department's on the ball and your scouting is on the ball, you're going to make inroads in the draft, no matter where you draft.
Yeah,
you're going to come up with players. So it's hard not to. And it disappoints me to see a team that's not going out there ready to, unable to compete every week. It's not I think all players want to win. But I mean, players go out there and know that they don't have full support of the organization. And that tends to affect how much effort you're going to get out of them on the field. And it takes on, it's a life of its own, and it never ends up good. And it's a bad situation, I think, for the following year for a team. Yeah. Because you end up poisoning your program. Yeah. It's a bad look. So, yeah, but, Arizona's never been a very well-run team. They've had a few big years, but over the course of their franchise history with the Bidwells, it has not gone well. It's not been good ownership. Yeah,
a long time since their last championship. Was it 1940?
1947.
47.
Yes.
47. Okay. Got some more comments here. Bring on the Panthers, rise up, from Nathan Hart. Thanks for joining us, Nathan. Pantera says, imagine if the early year players had to face today's bigger, faster, stronger players of today. Yeah, it's fun to think about that. I think Jim Brown would still have success. He wouldn't be the biggest and strongest and fastest because the players are incredibly athletic and strong and big today, unlike maybe 60 years ago. Definitely unlike 60 years ago. But the reason why I would put Brown first, Tom, ahead of, with all due respect, Walter Payton, Barry Sanders, some other guys, is because you can only judge a player based on the competition that he had.
Yes.
And Jim Brown was by far and away better than ever. And Walter Payton was as well. But in my opinion, I think Jim Brown was just a little bit better than all of the other running backs than Walter Payton of his day. And that, maybe you're grading on a curve a little bit because there weren't as many great running backs back in Jim Brown's day, but I wouldn't discredit Jim Brown because of that.
No, I wouldn't either. But one of the problems you run into and why you get this wide disparity is back in Jim Brown's day, Brown maybe was able to make enough of a living off football to survive all year. You couldn't make enough money as an athlete, as a professional athlete in baseball, football, basketball, or hockey, you had to get a job in the off season. You couldn't start training the minute the season was over. You had to get a job. You had to earn money. And, you couldn't train. You didn't have the options to train that you have now. Science has taken great leaps forward as far as how to prepare the human body for this kind of contact and how to be in shape for this kind of contact and how to be ready. So, there's a lot of things that have taken place between that time and now. Players now don't have to go out and get a job in the off season just to survive.
Right.
They start getting ready for the next season. So,
and that's a great point and could have contributed to why there wasn't as much competition then, or why there wasn't as many great running backs like Jim Brown, because they were doing other things in the offseason. They weren't training.
You went out, sold real estate, you worked in an office, you pumped gas, you worked at a grocery, you did whatever you had to do to get your family from one season to the next. And
totally different than today. Totally. Yeah. I was looking at some of the salaries for practice squad guys. Practice squad guys make more money than I thought. I thought it was more like a minor league baseball kind of thing where you're not making much, but obviously you got to last the whole season. You're getting paid by the week on the practice squad, and a lot of guys don't make it through the whole year on the practice squad, but they're making 200, 300, 400K in some cases.
Yeah, I know.
Which I'm not saying they don't deserve that. I was kind of surprised that
you're at the very top of your profession. You're at the very top of your profession as an NFL player. Even some of the best college players never make it in the NFL.
Yeah.
So if you've made it in the NFL, you have really accomplished something.
Even on the practice squad.
Right. Even on the practice squad.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. Patera also says, I doubt players are throwing games. Maybe sitting good players is a way of tanking. Yeah, I don't think players try to tank. And I don't think coaches do either. We saw that with the Dolphins, with Brian Flores. He wanted no part of that.
Nope.
And if you're a competitor on a team or coaching a team, no way are those guys tanking. But is it possible that the owner wants you to lose, or maybe even general manager with some of his roster construction, he purposefully doesn't bring in depth for you or better players, saving salary cap space for future years? Yeah, I definitely think that happens.
Yeah, no, players will not throw a contest. But their commitment and their heart and the way they feel going out on the field, when they know that ownership does not have a vested interest in their success, makes a big difference in how they play.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Today's show brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app. Use our promo code ASU. When you do, that gets you a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. So some free money for you. No better time to get started. You can do some college football stuff today, or just download the app and be ready for week 1 in the NFL season.
Next week, yeah, we're getting Nostradamus sobered up right now. He's getting ready. He's going to have picks for you coming up next week. His long winter drunken stupor, hibernation is over. Getting his black coffee, and we're getting him going.
He's really waiting to the last minute to start sobering up.
He always does. It's just terrible. He always does. He could practically, point to teams on a piece of paper this week. But next week he'll be ready. We're going to have some good stuff for you.
Good. Yeah, looking forward to it. Brian has a college football update for us. Colorado already in the end zone. Looks like Brian's also a fan of Primetime as their head coach.
Yeah, probably. It's going to be interesting to see that program with Primetime as the head coach. Looking forward to that. So,
And we do want to get to some Falcons stuff. We want to talk about their roster decisions and they filled out their practice squad. Those guys that are going to be making maybe, some 200, 300, 400K if they're on the practice squad all season long. Gary does have a college conference realignment question. Do you want to get to that and then the Falcons?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that, and we will jump right into it. Yes, we got Falcons coming up.
Yeah, so he wants us to comment on the conference realignment stuff. And actually, curiously enough, Tom and I were discussing this right before we came on live because I'm wearing my Syracuse shirt, and he asked me if Syracuse was going to be conference or whatever they're doing. And I don't really follow college football super closely. I see the college alignment stuff, when news pops on my computer or on Twitter. This week, I saw Clemson and I think it was Clemson and Florida State were trending because they have you been following, Tom? They don't want to take in some of the Pac-12 teams, right? That the ACC does want to take, or Clemson and Florida State want more money. There's something's going on there that I can't explain the whole story. And I know North Carolina is involved as well, that North Carolina could possibly leave the ACC with those two schools. So, to Gary's question,
hard to say.
I have no idea if it's over. I think long term, no. I think this is just the beginning.
This is just the beginning.
Yeah,
they're just getting started on this. There's going to be a lot more changes coming down the pike, and a lot of programs that maybe thought they were major college programs for a long time are not going to be major college programs anymore. And it's unfortunate, but that's the way this is going right now. You're either going to be with the haves or the have-nots. And I hate it. I haven't paid as much attention to college football. I'm with you, Dave, in the last few years, but, I barely know what to watch anymore. And it just doesn't work for me. And, I was telling Dave, I had read a few articles this week, and some people are thinking that we are getting close to a mega NCAA, football league, and a secondary football league where you will have relegation every year, and your good teams will go up. The best teams from the second tier go up, and the worst teams from the top tier go down. And that might be what we're facing.
That would be really interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting idea. I'm with you that it's a shame that this is what college football has come to. But at the same time, like the way it's set up, Syracuse isn't going to win the national championship anyway.
No.
So for them to be in a, second tier league or whatever, and they have a chance to win the championship, I don't know if that's so bad. Yeah, maybe that'll hurt recruiting and they won't have as good of a program, and maybe it hurts athletics across the board. Maybe it hurts the men's basketball team too. I don't know. We'll have to see how
that's an interesting point, Dave. How does this affect men's basketball and women's basketball? I mean, basketball is prominent on both sides. So how does this affect the basketball programs?
Well, one thing I've heard from people that I'm friends with that cover college sports, there's already, it hasn't even started yet, and there's already complaints that like USC volleyball has to go to Northwestern for a road match on a Saturday, and it's like it is ridiculous that you have these others less popular sports. I don't want to say they're not important, but it's just they don't bring in the money that football does. Obviously,
football is the king. It's the moneymaker.
Yeah, and it's just really, really silly for them to not be playing just local teams, having to travel across the country to play volleyball or tennis or golf or whatever.
Maryland and Rutgers are part of Big Ten now. So you got to travel to Maryland to play, some of your other, as I say, I hesitate to say less important sports, but competitive sports, but they don't get the attention, they don't make the money, but they're going to be affected.
Yeah, and will we have so we already have a situation where it's like FBS and FCS football, and that's only for football. We don't have FBS and FCS basketball teams. Like FCS basketball schools compete for Division I, the March Madness tournament. They're in that, and a lot of them do really well in the basketball tournament. So I don't know what the impact will be. I think maybe where we're going is with all this stuff with conference realignment, it's going to be just for football. And then for other sports, we're going to still have the old school conferences. Maybe that could be a solution.
Could be. But even with football, I hate the fact that we're losing a lot of conference rivalries that have been built up over the last 100 years, since college started. You're breaking up a lot of rivalries, a lot of big games, a lot of games that your fandom, that your alumni used to point towards and say, this, we get bragging rights for the year if we beat, if Nebraska beats Oklahoma, we got bragging rights for the year. If USC beats UCLA, that's the kind of thing you're looking at. And I just hate this. I hate it. I don't like, but it's what we've come to.
I see your point, but I do think if we can get a product that leads to more of an NFL setup where the teams are playing, there's fewer teams and they play each other and it's more obvious who is the best team. And we get into a situation where, the best 12 records make the playoffs rather than some committee the best 12 teams according to a committee make the playoffs. I would prefer that system because it's so flawed and so biased, and it doesn't matter who's picking. There's and this is what I was talking about with Syracuse never going to win a national championship in the current setup, is because there is a bias before the season begins that Syracuse isn't a good team. So even if they go 10-0 to begin the season and they lose their first game to go 10-1 and then finish 12-1 with a conference championship, they're looking at that loss as, well, that's the real Syracuse team, because you would never look at an Alabama team that way. You would never look at Georgia that way.
Nope.
Georgia wins the SEC. Whoever wins the SEC, it's automatic. They're in the playoff. If Vanderbilt somehow won the SEC, never going to happen. But if they did, everybody would say, well, Vanderbilt's great. They won the SEC. So
they won the SEC, right?
And Vanderbilt and Syracuse, probably pretty similar in terms of overall status in football.
I would say so. Yeah, right.
And yes, the SEC definitely is tougher. So there is they would deserve more credit for winning the SEC than Syracuse would the ACC. But because the conferences don't play each other, we don't really truly know year in and year out which one is actually the best. 5-6 years ago, the ACC was kind of up there for a brief time.
Yes. Challenging
the SEC. It did not last very long, but I guess I'm kind of talking in circles, but it just a sport where we can avoid opinions impacting who wins and who competes for that championship, I think is a better setup. And if that's the one positive we get out of it, I think that's a big positive that we could get out of all of this big mess.
Okay. I can see that. Don't all the way agree with, but I see where you're coming from there. Yeah. So it's still rough because it's still well, I grew up with the way I grew up as far as looking at college athletics, and it's just a big change. And
yeah, it definitely is. It's even a big change from when I was growing up.
Right. So takes a lot of getting used to. But yeah, it's going to keep going. This hasn't stopped. We will keep going.
Pantera proposes make a 30-team super league with 6 5-team leagues, 2 different leagues with 2 championships, maybe 10 games plus 4 local rivalry games that don't count towards the national title.
You never know, Pantera. You never know what shape this is going to take. I've been hearing it might be about 50 teams that become this super league. So it's hard to say.
Everybody has their own proposal.
Yeah. Right.
Everybody in the media, every fan like Pantera, everybody has their own idea of what it should be. And it's hard to tell which idea they're going to choose.
Yep. Yeah,
but let's get to some Falcons, though. They made some big roster decisions this week, and then, of course, they filled out the practice squad since then. We talked about Jalen Mayfield quite a bit last week. I spent 5-10 minutes on him, and I thought it was fitting, I guess is the word, that he was one of the first cuts that happened just hours after our show last week. Other than we've already covered Mayfield. So was there any other guys that kind of jumped out to you that didn't make the roster, good or bad, for the Falcons when they made their cuts Tuesday?
I'm surprised that they're coming out with only 5 receivers. But I look at it one way, that Arthur Smith expects to use some of his running backs in these pass catching situations. So, it's not just going to be these 5 receivers responsible for the passing game. But it's interesting to see that that's all they've taken onto the roster so far. I like the fact that Zay Malone made it onto the practice squad because he impressed me during camp. But it's a better receiving core than they had last year, but it is still thin. So, but you do have your running backs that are going to help that.
Yeah. You got Cordell Patterson, who I still think he's going to be a major part of this offense. I know it seems like at least on Bleacher Report, every time I see like a one trade candidate for every single team, it's Cordell Patterson for the Falcons every single time. And I just find that crazy that you don't think Cordell Patterson is going to be a big part of this Falcons offense.
No, it's ridiculous. He is the kind of guy that Arthur Smith loves. All right. This is a Swiss Army knife. This is a guy who can do anything on the football field. If you want to put him on the offensive line, I'm sure he would have a go at, filling in there if you ever needed him to. But this is a guy who can do so many things. When he walks onto the field, when he takes up his, whatever position and formation, the defense is paying attention to him.
Yeah.
They know where Cordell Patterson is. If he's on the field, they know where he is. And they are accounting for him. And that can only be good for the rest of your offense because they're not drawing as much attention. So I love Cordell Patterson. I know Arthur Smith does. And I don't know why people think that he doesn't fit this team. He is the perfect fit for this team.
Yeah.
For this all-position type offense that Arthur Smith wants to run, he does that. He's already done it. That's how he's made his reputation.
And what he adds on special teams as a returner and a gunner is invaluable as well. And so for people to say, oh, he's not worthy of keeping on the team was really surprising to me all of August.
Yeah,
really.
Exactly.
But yeah, back to the 5 wide receivers. So were you surprised that maybe JJ Arcega-Whiteside didn't make it? Or I know they brought back Malone on the practice squad, but I was surprised too that they didn't keep either Arcega-Whiteside or Malone on the active roster.
Yeah. So again, I see why. I understand it. You can't look at this roster in maybe a classic way because of the way Arthur Smith runs his offense, where you have your receivers are going to be your receivers, your tight ends are either going to block down or, hit the pattern, or you might have your running backs out in the flat, but that's about as far as it's going to go with them in the passing game. Bijan Robinson might run a long pass route. They might run crossers. They might run, seam routes. There's a lot of different things that I'm sure Smith feels he can do now with this roster. I think Smith finally has the roster he wants. And that's why I'm not as concerned about the 5 wide receivers. If somebody gets hurt, they do have, receivers on practice squad to pull. So it's not like there isn't I think you take Zay Malone and you need to activate him for a week or two, and I don't think you're losing much. I think he's a quality receiver. So you go that deep, and they do have some depth. But I think Arthur Smith just felt that he had other positions that he wanted to make sure was shored up, and that's why he only went with the 3 backs and fullback, and then with the 5 wide receivers.
Brian agrees with us that could not understand why Patterson was a cut candidate. Yeah, I thought that was crazy. Absolutely. Never, as I already said, and a straight candidate too.
Brian, it's clickbait. It's people who want you to click on their articles because you can't believe that they're saying it, and you want to see why they're saying it. It's clickbait. Ignore it. Don't get caught up in that. They want article views. They want page views. That's all they're looking for. And, and the thing is, once one person writes it starts picking up, other people say, well, no, maybe, let's look at this scenario. And you ended up with 3 or 4 guys who write the same thing. And it's just, and Dave and I have been in that situation where you're trying to find things to write. But I don't think you and I, Dave, I don't think we've ever settled for clickbait articles where I've always tried to have something to say. I know you've always tried to have something to say in your articles. We would believe we would never write an article like that.
Well, I think you're giving them more credit than they deserve, to be honest. I think a lot of the people that wrote about Cordell Patterson being a cut candidate just weren't familiar with the Falcons offense and Arthur Smith. Yeah,
that's true too.
And did not. It's very easy for a national guy who can't spend. They don't have the time to invest a lot of research into each individual team. When you're doing these every single team need to be included type article as a Bleacher Report. So you look at who they've drafted in the first round and you say, oh, well, they've drafted Bijan Robinson this year. They drafted Tyler Algier last year. So Cordell Patterson last year of his contract, he's 32 years old, however old he is. And it makes sense on the surface that would be your take. Right. But if you follow the Falcons, Arthur Smith, and if you know that Patterson does this on special teams, this is a returner, he does this as a receiver, this is as a running back, and how much Arthur Smith loves him. If you know all of those other things, then it shoots down the idea that he would be a cut candidate.
Right, exactly. So that's just the way it is. Yeah. And but you're right. Yeah, sometimes writers are in a position where they have to write about every team, and it's tough to do. So, but don't worry about anything about Cordell Patterson. He's too good and just does too much for this team.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated to see how he fits. I think he's going to be a big piece along with Robinson, obviously, and Algier is still going to get his touches. So I just want to. I'm looking, because we didn't see it in the preseason, looking forward to seeing how this all fits together kind of on the fly in week 1. So, that'll be very interesting. One of the top things I'm looking at in the first weekend of the NFL. But looking at their roster, though, Tom, they decided to keep Logan Woodside for that third quarterback.
Yes, they did.
I think a lot of teams, despite the new rule, there weren't a ton of teams that kept the third quarterback. They do have.
A lot did.
Did a lot? Oh, okay.
I think a lot did. Yes. I think a lot of teams did take advantage of that, which surprised me.
Did. You know off the top of your head?
Well, the Bears did. Let's see. I off the top of my head, I probably had more teams about middle of the week than I do now that I can think of.
Brian, Brian has the answer for us. 13 teams kept 3 quarterbacks.
Okay, that's good.
Brian, do you know how many kept 3 quarterbacks last year?
No, practically
nobody. Is it up a lot significantly from last year?
Listen, my thing is, I thought that later in the season, when you got to when you saw you were a playoff contender and maybe you did have a quarterback who was fighting injury or, on the field, although you knew he was hurt, it occurred to me that you could see teams adding that third quarterback to the roster, because then you get into that situation where you don't want your starter to be down early in the game, your second quarterback maybe in the second or third quarter goes down, and now you're out. And you're a contender, and you can't afford to throw away any games. And that's the way I looked at it. That's the time when it comes into prominence is when you have that, when you're contending or you're in the playoffs.
So are you surprised that so many teams kept a third quarterback? Are you surprised that Logan Woodside was kept?
Yes, I am. I'm very surprised that Logan Woodside was kept.
Okay.
As I say, I understand the reasoning, but you're fresh. You're going into the season. You're not going to have 2 quarterbacks going down on the first week of the season and have to use that third guy. Now, I know the third guy does not count against the 46-man roster count on game day, which is an advantage. But you are losing a special teamer, or you're losing a little bit more depth on your defense or somewhere else on the field to keep that third quarterback on the roster. So, and I'm thinking you can afford that better later in the year. But right now, you're just getting started, and it might be nice to have that more depth on the roster than keeping that third quarterback. So yeah, I was a bit surprised.
Well, I think obviously they kept Woodside because they like him, not really because they think that Ritter and Heineke are going to go down in week 1 and they need Woodside immediately. I just think they like him as a depth quarterback, and they didn't want to risk him needing to go through waivers to get him back on the practice squad. I
see that, and it's possible with the preseason he had that he might have been claimed off of waivers. That is a possibility. He did have a great preseason, but that's the preseason. It's not the NFL season. He hasn't showed much during the regular season in the NFL in his couple of years in the league. So how are you evaluating him? Are you evaluating him off this just one preseason? That's always tough to look at. So, but, are you saying that 13 teams also looked at it that way, that we couldn't get that third quarterback through waivers and, we might as well keep him on a roster? It's, I don't think he would have been claimed. I think he would have went onto the practice squad, and he's still available to you. I mean, the minute somebody gets hurt, he's there.
Right. Yeah.
And I know any team can take your player off the practice squad, but it doesn't happen a lot. I do get that. You risk more losing him, and I see Smith wanting to keep him around. We'll see how well it affects the roster.
Yeah, there really isn't as much of signing other players off of other teams' practice squads. It's kind of like you're just bringing up, because you have the ability to bring up guys more easily now on your own practice squad. The teams seem more focused on, okay, these are my 16 guys, and these are the guys I'm bringing up on game day if I got injuries.
Right. These are the guys you're most familiar with. These are the guys that you have already played the preseason with, for the most part.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll pick waivers off another team and put them on your practice squad. But for the most part, these are guys that have been with you, that have been through the entire summer with you, that have sweated with you all preseason. And, you're used to having those guys available to you. You're not used to going cherry picking off of other rosters, but players that you're not as familiar with. So these guys know your system. These guys know what you like to do. They've already been a part of your offense and defense.
You mentioned Zay Malone as a nice addition for the practice squad. I also like them adding, we talked about Godwin Obiblike as a possibility of being on the active roster. Did not make the team because we're talking about they just didn't keep a ton of skilled guys. But he's on the practice squad. Timmy Horn had a good preseason defensive lineman. He's on the practice squad. I thought that was a nice guy to bring back. And Natrone Brooks, I think he didn't have a great game against the Steelers the last preseason game, and I think that may have impacted his status, but got him back too on the practice squad. So
a lot of guys didn't have a great game against the Steelers.
Well, that's true. I mean, and some of those guys got cut. We talked about that last week.
Yes.
Breon Borders got cut.
Yes, he did.
And they could have kept, from what I understand, they could have just kept him, put him on the restricted list or suspended list and still kept, the maximum 53 guys. He didn't have to count as one of the 53 guys to begin the season, but the Falcons just said, I don't even want to bother keeping.
They didn't go there, right? Yeah. No, he wouldn't have counted against the 53 man. They could have kept him for free. They just didn't feel like he was
worthy of even
keeping in their secondary.
Which says a lot about the guy. You don't even want to keep him for free.
Oh, there you go. And I didn't think he had a terrible preseason. I think he made some decent plays. He also got beat a couple of times. He had a couple of bad penalties.
Yeah.
But hell, everybody does that. You're getting ready for the season. You're going to make mistakes. But, you have to trust what Ryan Nielsen is saying about the players that he brings onto the team. And, you got to realize that he probably has a great idea of the type of player, the type of attitude, the type of worker that he wants on his bench, on his squad. And that, Breon Borders just didn't fit this one. He didn't fit his scheme. So that's what it comes down to.
And going back to the active roster, we talked about him last week, and I don't think it's a huge surprise he made the team. He played well in the preseason, but it was great to see the 7th round pick, DeMarco Helms, officially make the roster. We both thought he would, but it's just awesome to see late picks immediately prove themselves and earn roster spots. And I think he's going to play a pretty significant role in the secondary for the Falcons this year. We'll see how he does. And maybe a diamond in the rough got him really late.
Yeah. Oh, as I say, Helms is one of those guys, may not have all the characteristics that kind of bounce out of a scouting report at you, but smart, knows where the football is, knows where it's going to be, is always around the ball. If you look at tackles, if you look at people who are around the football the most, you're probably going to see his number on your TV screen quite a bit. And I love players like that. Give me, and this is what I get at. You don't have to be a great athlete to be a great pro football player. As a matter of fact, you look at, I don't think great athletes overall make good pro football players. Or else we'd have a bunch of decathletes and everything else on the
right.
Every year. But Helms is a smart football player, knows where the ball goes, has a great football mind, and I am looking forward to seeing him on the field.
Pantera says all the 7-round picks made the roster of the Falcons this year, and that is true. And tremendous drafting and scouting by the Falcons that doesn't happen all the time.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't even happen half the time, I would say. So like it's a pretty nice accomplishment that for a Falcons team that has a better roster than previous 2 years, we would say.
Yes.
But that draft class, all 7 of them still made it.
Yeah. And there's your depth coming up. There's your depth for this year, and there's your possible starters coming up in the next 2 or 3 years. Guys who have the chance to improve now that they're on your roster. They get to justify the faith that you've shown in them by putting them on the roster, saying you've made it. We think a lot of you. So, and I love having all 7 guys being that type of player.
Well, we got about 10 minutes left in the show. We'd love to address any other questions you have about the Falcons, their practice squad, active roster, I guess any other college alignment questions you may have for us, although we're not experts in that area. But I think, maybe we'll take the last 10 minutes today, Tom, and talk bigger picture, maybe even make a couple Super Bowl predictions. But to start the Super Bowl conversation, I read an article this morning from NFL.com that picked 7 teams as the most. I don't know if they phrased it as most likely winners, or these are the 7 teams that are the most likely, or these are the only 7 that could win the Super Bowl. But they listed 7 Super Bowl contenders. Kind of odd that there's only 7, but these were the 7. According to NFL.com. Obviously, you got the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yes.
You got the defending NFC champs in the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yep. They've strengthened themselves.
You got the Buffalo Bills and the Cincinnati Bengals as the top competition in the AFC, which I think is also the consensus.
Yeah.
You have the other NFC championship game participant in the San Francisco 49ers. Those are the top 5. The last 2 on the list are the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Jets.
Oh, God. Okay. Jets are getting a lot of love because of Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, and I don't get that love. Like, I don't think Aaron Rodgers played that well last year, and I just don't get why we think the Jets are going to be really anything this year. I mean, I am not shocked, because this is what the media has treated the Jets all off season, that they're Super Bowl contenders, but I just don't see them as a real contender in the AFC.
Neither do I. And I don't get it. And it's all because of Aaron Rodgers.
They played well on defense last year, and I guess the narrative just is, well, they've added the quarterback now, so they're going to be a good team.
Yeah, they do have a very good defense. Quentin Williams, Sauce Gardner, and I think they improved their roster over the summer. But Brian stout on defense. Yeah, they. And that's Robert Saleh's, that's his specialty, his defense.
Right.
That's why he's there. But, yeah, I don't see Aaron Rodgers being the savior of this franchise. He's older. Not everybody's – I say most quarterbacks, when they hit 37, start to decline. Very few broke that mold, where they were able to keep their abilities, up, and keep their production riding the same as they did before age 37. Most take a significant drop in production at age 37 and 38. So, and I did the research, and as I say, one of these days I'm going to recreate that research and write it up when I do have time. But, Rodgers is at that point where things get a little tougher for a quarterback. Not everybody's the freak of nature like Tom Brady. You have one freak of nature in over 100 years of NFL football. But for the most part, no, these quarterbacks tend to run out at that point in their careers. Matt Ryan did. Rodgers is there.
Ben Roethlisberger did.
Ben Roethlisberger, that's what I was trying to think.
And I thought we already saw a decline in Rodgers' play last year. I mean, I got his stats pulled up here.
Yeah.
He averaged 6.8 yards per attempt. That was down almost a full yard from 2021.
Right.
His completion percentage was down 4%. His touchdowns went from 37 when he won MVP in 2001 to 26 last year. The interceptions tripled from 4 his last MVP season to 12. He hadn't thrown more than 10 or double. He hadn't reached double digits in interceptions before last year since 2010.
Yeah.
And the 12 interceptions he had was his most in a season since the first year he started in 2008.
Right.
And I get a lot of that decline was different coordinator, different receivers, didn't have a lot of help on offense. But do you really think like the Jets have that much more help for him that another year older Rodgers is going to take a big step back to being an MVP candidate? I think that's a huge, talking about what ifs or big question marks. That's a huge question mark.
Yes.
Huge.
And again, quarterbacks don't do that. Once things start slipping, as far as the skills, as far as their reflexes, their ability to get the ball out on time, you don't get it back.
Yeah.
There's a reason for it. And it's going to be rough. And wait until one of these guys that Rodgers is all talking high about and, feeling wonderful about, wait until a couple of these receivers or a couple of these running backs make a couple of mistakes on the field. And watch Rodgers on the sideline.
Yeah.
And this smiling, confident Aaron Rodgers picture is going to go away awful fast. Because
they better hope they get off to a good start to avoid that.
Exactly.
Brian's got some good points about the Jets. They do have some good players. They have a really great defense. I'm not saying the Jets are going to miss the playoffs, although I don't think they're a shoo-in for the playoffs because the AFC has a lot of great teams. But I just wouldn't put them up there like if we're putting the Chiefs in their own tier and then the Bengals and Bills are in the next tier, which I don't even know if I agree with that, to be honest. I think I would put Chiefs, Bengals, Bills, and there's a gap, and then the Bills.
Yeah.
And then there's a gap again. And the Jets aren't the next team for me. The next team, I think, is probably going into the season at least. I think it's the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Baltimore Ravens have some what ifs. Can Lamar Jackson finally stay healthy? Is Odell Beckham actually going to do anything? I think that's another overblown offseason narrative that he's just the savior of they finally have a wide receiver in Baltimore. I mean, he hasn't played in 2 years. What Odell Beckham Jr. are we going to get? Right,
exactly. Well, everybody's looking at the narrative from a couple of years ago when he joined the Rams, and he became a big part.
He was, yes.
Matthew Stafford's, Matthew Stafford put a lot of faith in him, and he got hurt in the Super Bowl, but a lot of people will tell you he was a big reason why that offense got to the Super Bowl.
Well, and he was on his way to winning Super Bowl MVP before he got hurt in that game.
Right.
He was a huge factor. The Bengals were taking away Cooper Kupp, and Odell Beckham Jr. was running like crazy in the first quarter. So, but I just, after a year and a half off and recovering from another significant knee injury, what Odell Beckham Jr. are we going to get? Having said that, I still think the Ravens are, if I was doing power rankings, I would put the Ravens ahead of the Jets. And the other, I don't know if I would put the Lions ahead of the Cowboys necessarily, but the other team I would mention as I think should be mentioned as a contender. And this is the, I guess, boldest I'm going to go in these predictions, Tom, is I think the Lions should be in the conversation. I think the Lions could make a deep run this year. They have the talent on their roster to go deep into the playoffs. And we've seen teams in the NFC the last few years that were like 8-9, 9-8, and then make a huge jump. It's harder to do that in the AFC, but the NFC right now kind of more open.
Yes,
the Lions are that team to keep an eye on that could go from 9-8, weren't in the playoffs, to we're in the NFC Championship game this year.
They could, very possibly. And they bought into that coach's philosophy full time. I mean, they love that coach. They perform for him. And Jared Goff looks like he's had a second lease on life being in Detroit. Yeah. And it's going to be an interesting season. Next Thursday night, we'll see how they perform against the Chiefs.
Yeah, and we're going to see immediately where the Lions stack up against the defending champs on the road. I mean, I cover the Lions for Heavy.com, and there's a lot of excitement around the team. My gosh, if they somehow beat the Chiefs, I cannot imagine what Twitter is going to be like in Detroit the next day. It's going to be crazy. Absolutely crazy. I'm not saying
it's unbearable.
Unbearable. Oh, get it?
Oh, man. Okay.
or should we say unlionable?
Okay. Yeah.
Unlionable. But I'm excited for the season. I think we all are. And we are going to get, I think, a great first matchup on Thursday. An up-and-coming team that we hope will give us a good game against the defending champs.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Looking forward to it.
We're out of time, but was there any team that I didn't mention that should have been on that list for NFL.com that you want to mention real quick as a team that you're eyeing as a Super Bowl contender, at least going into the season? This all changes after week 1, of course.
Yeah, it all changes, and it's going to change quite a bit over the season, but I think that's about as good a lineup as you're going to get before the season starts. Just a little side note, Pro Football Focus has the Falcons ranked 27th in their preseason power rankings.
27th.
All
right.
So we'll see how that happens too.
I mean, talk about like writers seeing a theme and like going to that and jumping on it and running with it themselves. That has been a very popular narrative that the Falcons are a bottom 5 team in the league. Definitely bottom 10.
Yeah.
They have not gotten any respect. And on some level, you have to earn the respect, and the Falcons haven't earned it yet with this current roster. No. But I do think they are above, probably, I would rank them above several of the teams that they're behind in that ranking.
I would say so.
Yeah.
They got the Saints at 26, the Falcons at 27, and the Panthers at 28.
Where's Tampa Bay?
21.
Wow. Tampa Bay is that much higher than them.
Yeah, I don't see that. I don't know why. I don't know how that works.
Because a lot of power rankings, or some, maybe not a lot. I can't say I read a lot of power rankings, but some of the ones I've seen have Tampa bottom 3, bottom 4.
Well, the problem is you're looking at Baker Mayfield as your starting quarterback.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Which nothing else really behind him as far as established quarterback. And I said a long time, a few weeks ago when we first started the offseason, I'm through defending Baker Mayfield. I have been defending Baker Mayfield his entire career. And I have been talking up Baker Mayfield as far as what he's able to do and his talent and when he's had a chance to show that talent. But he doesn't show it enough. And I am through defending Baker Mayfield. So I don't get how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers rate so highly.
Yeah. I think that's what is a very key point about quarterback evaluation. You can't look at the best tape or the best plays, best highlights from a quarterback and say, well, he can do it. He just needs to be more consistent.
Right.
No, he's not good because he's not consistent.
That's consistent.
That's why he's not. That's why he's average.
Yes.
Because he can be great, but oftentimes he's also not great.
Right.
And like if he's in the NFL because yes, sometimes he can do it. But the reason why he's not a starter or hasn't worked out is because he's not consistent. The best quarterbacks do it all the time. They don't make any mistakes. They don't make any silly throws or boneheaded decisions. So we need to see consistency, not Baker Mayfield leading the Rams on a game-winning drive 2 days after he was signed against a Raiders team that finished with 6 wins or whatever. Like that's not going to cut it as a guy that I want as my quarterback.
Nope. But basically, Tampa Bay has left themselves no more options as far as quarterback. It's either him or you're basically starting over. And that's the way it is. Who is it? Kyle Trask is his backup.
Kyle Trask is their other guy.
Yeah. So, you're starting over. If Baker Mayfield doesn't cut it, and past history says he's not going to cut it. And I'm not talking him up. I don't think he's going to cut it either.
Well, one thing that will cut it if you're into sports betting, Prize Picks. Download the app, use our promo code ASU when you do. That gets you 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. So free money for you. It's a great way to support the show. Other ways you can support the show, follow us on Facebook. Give us a like there. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Atlanta Sports Unlimited. Give us a like on this video if you're watching on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at TJ Pollen, at DM Holcomb. And if you're watching on replay, send us your reactions and comments from the show on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to hear it. So everybody, thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for listening to the replay, if that's what you did. And it's football week. It's week 1. Have a great week, everyone.